Hey YouTube, how we all doing today? It's Cheeky Curations here. Now I'm going to be doing a ranking video for you. I'm going to be ranking all the Fast and Furious movies from worst to best. Now let's begin. The worst I'm just going to say is Hobbs and Shaw, not a bad film, but it's just not really a Fast and Furious film. It was more of a Dwayne Johnson, Jason Statham buddy cop film. So yeah, not really going to say much about that. Then I'm going to say F9, which I think is the worst mainline Fast and Furious film, and God, I hated F9 so much. It just, everything that I loved about all the previous films, it just ruined it with just constant retconning, constant repetition of plot points. And yeah, it just was a mess. And I felt like they were just so focused on making it more ridiculous than the action instead of telling a good, coherent story. I thought John Cena didn't really bring much more to the table as Dom's supposedly lost brother, which we didn't know about for like 8+ films. But saying that though, there is one positive about F9. I like the flashback scenes of a young Dom and a young Jacob, young Letty, young Mia, especially in the street racing. It kind of, I would say, gave a bit of some potential of a Fast and Furious prequel series, or film which I'd like to see with Dom or Brian in their separate series of how they became the characters they were. And it goes back to its roots of street racing before it became more militarized. But yeah, F9's that is, and then following that is Fast X, its successor. Not as bad as F9, but with Fast X, it was bait. It was just trying to copy Infinity War. And I feel like doing that, it just made the film overstaffed and very uneventful and just didn't make sense at all. Again, another repeating plot points. Jason Momoa's Dante Reyes wanted to get revenge on Dom's family for killing his father in Fast 5. Well, guess what? We already saw that plot in Fast and Furious 7 with Jason Statham's character, Deckard Shaw, going to get revenge on Dom and his crew for taking out his brother in Fast and Furious 6. So again, it was the same repetition plot line. Characters turned out to still be alive when we thought they were dead. And just didn't really make sense. I feel like it was just a lot of characters. You could just take them out the film, they wouldn't change anything. So yeah, it was just overstuffed and too overwhelming. So yeah, that would be Fast X. After that is Tokyo Drift. With Tokyo Drift, the question I've got with Tokyo Drift is, if it had the mainline characters like Dom and Brian, Roman, Tej, Letty, would have been better received. Maybe, maybe not. I feel like at the time when Tokyo Drift came out, it was Fast and Furious was a bit outdated, and I feel like they did need to kind of change directions. And it was originally a straight to DVD release, but it got quite a good reception, so they decided to make it a cinematic release. However, I did kind of like aspects of the street race, and I thought it introduced Han, one of the fan favorites of the series, and I thought Sean was a very good protagonist, quite underrated, very confused and conflicted protagonist, kind of like Brian, but in a much younger version and a bit more. It was like a mix of Dom and Brian, I'm gonna say. Sean was. He had kind of Brian's conflicts, but also Dom's recklessness. So I'll say Tokyo Drift's up there. And then after that, I'm gonna have to say Fast and Furious 8. I went in with Fast and Furious 8 with quite high expectations at the time because of the success of Fast and Furious 7. And I thought 8 wasn't that bad. I think they did a okay job trying to keep things new, having Dom turn against the family, but I just kind of felt like it was a bit underwhelming. It just kind of all happened. That was it, really. There was not really too much build up. For the action scenes were quite a step back from 5, 6, 7, and even 4. But it was still an okay film. It was better than the ones that came after it. And I feel like Jason Statham was handled all right in the film. I think I know it's a controversial opinion. A lot of people didn't like how they just accepted him into the family, but I like how they showed hesitation first to him joining, but he just admitted he didn't care, but he did it because deep down he does have a heart, and he's a complicated character. I think it added more grey to his character, so I thought Jason Statham did kind of steal the show in Fast and Furious 8. Following that is Fast and Furious 4. The kind of the soft reboot / sequel to the series, At the beginning, when I first watched it, I kind of had my problems with it. Like, why did Brian become an FBI agent again when he decided he was no longer going to be with the police anymore after the first film? But I do think it was actually quite a decent film. I feel like it was a good halfway point between trying to reinvent the series into a more action movie franchise, but still keeping the street racing scene alive. And I feel like it was the last Fast and Furious film that was very true to the street racing scene, I would say, before it went more action orientated. And I thought Braga was a very, very decent, well planned out villain. And Letty's death was shocking, even though I would have liked to have seen more of her. It was shocking though. I thought it did a good job bringing Dom and Brian back together. It really added some purpose to it. And also not making Dom and Brian become besties immediately, that their friendship and relationship gets built up over time and there has some bumps along the film. Whereas I think other Fast and Furious films have just kind of rushed the redemption arcs for many times with the villain, with like heroes that have had conflicts with each other, or villains, shall we say. So yeah, that'll be Fast and Furious 4. After that is Fast and Furious 6. You know, Fast and Furious 6, it's just a very fun film to watch. It's set in London. I like the action scenes, especially the tank one. They brought Letty back, which was a really good mix. I thought Luke Evans was a very good villain as Owen Shaw, and it did have introduced Jason Statham to the series, one of my favourite characters in the series. But however, I just felt like it was the beginning of when they were starting to become a bit more ridiculous, I would say. They were starting to kind of lose touch to why people started to watch the Fast and Furious films, which was to tune in for the fast cars and the race. And I feel like Fast and Furious 6 was the beginning of that. But still, it was a decent film. I feel like all the characters had their moments to shine and they were believable. They weren't just superheroes. So yeah, that'll be Fast and Furious 6. And then after that is Too Fast, Too Furious. You know, Too Fast, Too Furious, it's an underrated one. I can understand why people might have issues with it because there's no Vin Diesel in the film, and Dom was the poster boy / protagonist of the first film. Even though I would say Brian was the protagonist, but Dom was like the poster boy, the one that people get attracted to go and watch it. So yeah, but still, I thought it was a decent film. Introduced Roman Pierce. It was a good way to kind of expand the Fast and Furious universe, not just within Vin Diesel and Paul Walker's characters. So yeah, I do think Too Fast, Too Furious was good, and I feel like it really still stayed true to the street racing scene. So yeah, I would like Too Fast, Too Furious then. Following that is Fast and Furious 7. You know, I liked Fast and Furious 7. You know, it was a hard watch because of Paul Walker's passing, and you just kind of knew, oh, this is going to be his final film. But still, I thought it did an amazing job. I loved Jason Statham as Deckard Shaw. He was a menacing villain. And I like to see Jason Statham play as villains more in his movies. Even though we do see him more as a hero in most of his films, he did get redeemed in later films. He killed it as a villain, and it was just a fun watch to get to watch him fight Dwayne Johnson and Vin Diesel. And I loved the locations, like in Abu Dhabi, when they did the big skyscraper jump, and going back to the streets in LA where the first films were set was a really good throwback. And you know, that ending to 7 was just, it was a lot. One of my most emotional film endings of all time. But now let's follow it to the runner-up, the film that started it all, The Fast and the Furious. It's funny because when I think about the first Fast and Furious film now, it is kind of the spiritual successor to Point Break, the bank robber film with Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze, but just with fast cars. But yeah, that was the film that started it all out, and Brian O'Connor was an amazing protagonist for the film because I liked how they was trying to introduce him to the gang and his inner conflict, how he's kind of in some ways in denial that Dom was the main culprit behind all the truck hijackings. But I liked it kind of exploring that inner conflict of his and realizing it's not as black and white. But yeah, so the first Fast and Furious film is my second favorite. And then my favorite is Fast 5. I feel like Fast 5 was the best Fast and Furious film without a doubt, and actually one of my favorite action films of all time. I thought it was the perfect balance between still staying true to the series, but also gearing to more action. It introduced Dwayne Johnson as Luke Hobbs, who I thought is a very good addition to the series. It really brought life to the franchise and made Fast and Furious to what it is today. And their action scenes were great, from the train heist sequence all the way to the vault heist in Fast 5. So yeah, that's my ranking for all the Fast and Furious films. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to tell me what your favorite Fast and Furious film is, please feel free to leave in the comments below. Thank you. Goodbye.